5, a woman is dead and a man is in jail after an early morning shooting in Athens. Athens police say they found 26-year-old Alexis Garth on the driveway of a home off this road here. This is Oakdale Ridge Lane. She was taken to the hospital where she later died.
Tonight we're learning more about the victim of a deadly domestic violence shooting on New Year's Day in Limestone County. Athens police say 26-year-old Alexis Garth died at Huntsville Hospital after being shot around 4 in the morning.
The 26-year-old died after she was shot multiple times by a man she once loved.
How he spoke, he loved my sister. So no, I didn't think it would come to this point at all. I didn't. Took somebody's sister, you took the mother to your daughter, you took somebody else's daughter. You could have just let her leave, other than taking her life.
While the rest of the world was raising a glass to the promise of a brand new year, the quiet streets of Athens, Alabama, were shattered by a sound that would change a family forever. It was 4 a.m. on January 1st, 2023. In the freezing dark of a suburban driveway, a 26-year-old mother found herself staring down the barrel of a gun. In that split second, she didn't beg for her life. She didn't run. Instead, she made a choice that defied human instinct, a choice that saved a life but cost her everything. If you are new to the Dark Minds channel, welcome. Here, we don't just look at the headlines. We dive deep into the cases that matter, uncovering the systemic failures and honoring the stories of those who cannot speak for themselves. If you believe in honoring the truth and keeping the names of victims alive, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You belong in this community, because the tragedy that unfolded that New Year's morning shocked the community of Athens. But as the flashing lights of the patrol cars pulled into the driveway, it wasn't just a killer waiting for them. It was a dark secret hidden underneath a parked car, and a terrifying question that the state of Alabama was desperately trying to avoid answering. To truly understand the gravity of what happened on New Year's Day, we have to step back from the flashing police lights and the chaos of that driveway. We have to look at the life that was being built and the quiet, creeping shadow that slowly dismantled it. Alexis Garth was 26 years old, an age where the rough drafts of early youth finally start shaping into a defined, purposeful life. She was a young woman who carried herself with a distinct, infectious warmth, the kind of person who filled a room not by being the loudest, but by being the most genuinely attentive. Her family watched with immense pride as she balanced the grueling demands of her education, poring over textbooks and studying to become a physical therapist. She wanted a career rooted in healing, in helping people regain their strength and walk through their own recoveries. But if you asked Alexis what defined her, she wouldn't have pointed to her textbooks. She would have pointed to her daughters. She was a mother to 2 beautiful girls, a toddler who was 3 years old, full of energy and questions, and a tiny 8-month-old infant who was just beginning to explore the world from the safety of her mother's arms. Alexis's days were a continuous, exhausting, yet joyful cycle of making bottles, packing diaper bags, planning for the future, and stealing quiet moments to study while her babies slept. Everything she did was anchored by a fierce desire to give those 2 little girls a stable, beautiful life. She was their protector, their anchor, and their brightest light.
Who's mommy's favorite girl in the world?
But about a year before that fateful night, a new variable entered this carefully balanced equation. His name was ky'ruan Yarbrough. He was 20 years old. In the beginning, the relationship followed a script that is tragically familiar to anyone who understands the psychology of domestic abuse. There were no overt red flags, no explosive arguments on day one. ky'ruan initially presented himself as someone who wanted to be a part of Alexis's world, stepping into the space around her and her children. Alexis, who always looked for the good in people, welcomed him in. But domestic control rarely begins with a fist or a weapon. It begins with a whisper. It begins with the slow, insidious erosion of boundaries, so subtle that the victim doesn't even realize the walls are closing in until they've already locked. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, ky'ruan's demeanor began to shift. The attention turned into monitoring. The affection turned into possessiveness. It started with small things, subtle comments about who Alexis was talking to, or a quiet, brooding resentment when her focus was entirely on her studies or her family instead of him. He began to inject himself into the friction points of her daily life, slowly creating an environment where Alexis felt she had to walk on eggshells just to keep the peace in her own home. As the months pressed on, the psychological grip tightened. ky'ruan's behavior became increasingly volatile, marked by unpredictable mood swings that kept the household in a state of constant low-level anxiety. Alexis found herself managing his emotions alongside raising her children, constantly trying to de-escalate situations before they could spiral. She was a fiercely independent woman, but the nature of coercive control is designed to wear down even the strongest spirits, chipping away at their confidence and isolating them from their safety nets. Yet, Alexis was a mother first. As the toxic patterns escalated from emotional manipulation into outright hostility, she looked at her two daughters. She realized that the environment brewing inside their Oakdale Ridge Lane home was no longer safe, stable, or healthy for them. She refused to let her girls grow up in the shadow of fear. By December of 2022, as the rest of the world was looking forward to holiday celebrations and fresh starts, Alexis made a quiet, definitive resolve. The relationship was over. She began the incredibly heavy, dangerous process of untangling her life from his, preparing to tell ky'ruan that he needed to move out. Anyone who studies domestic violence will tell you that the act of leaving is the ultimate trigger for an abuser. It is the moment the illusion of absolute control is shattered, and it is statistically the most lethal window of time for a victim. Alexis was smart, and she was careful. She knew that confronting him and walking away wouldn't be easy, and she knew that leaving him was dangerous. What she didn't know was that a hidden flaw in the system had already stacked the deck against her survival weeks before she even made her choice. The final hours of 2022 did not feel like a celebration inside the house on Oakdale Ridge Lane. While the rest of Athens, Alabama, watched the clock tick down toward midnight, wrapped in the warmth of new beginnings, the air inside Alexis's home was thick with cold, suffocating dread. The decision had been made. The line in the sand had been drawn. Alexis was packing her belongings, untangling her life, and reclaiming her space. But as the night wore on, and the calendar officially rolled over into January 1st, 2023, the reality of her departure began to sink in for ky'ruan Yarbrough. And with that reality came an explosive, volatile rage. By 3 a.m., the argument had escalated far past the point of a normal relationship dispute. It had mutated into something deeply dangerous. Yarbrough, realizing his psychological grip on Alexis was entirely shattered, resorted to the ultimate tool of control: raw intimidation. The walls of the suburban home echoed with shouting, the heavy pacing of someone trapped by their own anger, and the terrifying, escalating nature of his threats. Panicked, isolated, and sensing that the situation was rapidly spiraling out of her control, Alexis managed to secretly dial her family. She needed a lifeline. She needed witnesses. On the other end of that phone line, miles away in the dead of night, her loved ones woke up to the sound of pure terror. They didn't just hear an argument. They listened in absolute horror as Yarbrough's voice boomed through the receiver, shouting explicit, chilling promises of violence. They could hear the raw panic in Alexis's voice as she tried to de-escalate him, her mind racing to protect the two innocent children sleeping just rooms away. Realizing that every second counted, and that Alexis was running out of time, her frantic family used a second phone to dial 911, begging the emergency dispatcher to send officers to the address immediately. But inside the house, time had already run out. Driven by instinct and an overwhelming need to get her children away from the venom building inside the home, Alexis grabbed her 3-year-old daughter. She couldn't wait for the police. She had to move. Slipping out of the door and into the freezing, pitch-black air of 4 a.m., she made a break for her vehicle parked in the driveway. The gravel crunched under her feet as she hurried towards safety, clutching her little girl tightly against the winter cold. But Yarbrough was right behind her. He burst through the door and onto the driveway, the darkness offering no hiding place. He wasn't just chasing her to talk, he was armed. Just as the distant faint sound of a police siren began to cut through the quiet night air, Yarbrough closed the distance. The flashing blue and red lights of the first arriving Athens Police Department cruiser actually rounded the corner of Oakdale Ridge Lane, illuminating the suburban street. But the sight of the law didn't stop him. It broke his final restraint. In a chaotic, terrifying blur of motion, Yarbrough raised the firearm. 5 deafening gunshots shattered the neighborhood silence, the muzzle flashes cutting through the dark. In that microsecond, faced with absolute lethality, Alexis Garth did not freeze. She didn't drop to the ground to save herself. Her final maternal instinct took over completely. Using her own body as a physical shield, she threw herself over her 3-year-old daughter, absorbing the impact of the gunfire to create a barrier of protection. Because of that instantaneous, heroic sacrifice, her little girl was left untouched by the bullets. In the terrifying confusion that followed the gunfire, the traumatized 3-year-old managed to scramble away into the pitch blackness, instinctively crawling into the tight, dark space underneath a parked vehicle in the driveway, hiding silently as her mother collapsed onto the cold pavement. When the police officers slammed their cruiser doors open and drew their weapons, the echoes of the 5th shot were still hanging in the air. Yarbrough, seeing the headlights and the overwhelming police presence now surrounding the driveway, realized his escape was impossible. He immediately threw his hands into the air, dropping the weapon and surrendering to the officers without firing a shot at them. The scene that followed was a chaotic nightmare of flashlights, shouting, and medical personnel racing against a ticking clock. Alexis was heavily bleeding but still breathing, her body holding onto life by a thread. Paramedics rushed her into the back of an ambulance, speeding toward Huntsville Hospital's intensive care unit with sirens wailing. Meanwhile, back in the driveway, an officer kneeling on the asphalt spotted a small movement in the shadows beneath the car. But as investigators placed handcuffs on the gunman, they looked up his record, and what they discovered turned a tragic crime scene into a wave of public fury.
26-year-old Alexis Garth, her 2 daughters, and boyfriend ky'ruan Yarbrough moved into their new home in Athens on January 1st, 2022. A Facebook post commemorated the moment as a new beginning and overcoming the odds. But 1 year later, January 1st, 2023, things would take a turn for the worst.
We left Huntsville, came back here. She brought my keys to Buc-ee's, and then not even an hour after that, I got a call.
Miracle Scott, Garth's younger sister, raced to the home while their mother called 911. Police were directed to the residence on Oakdale Ridge Lane, where Garth was found with gunshot wounds in the driveway of her home.
While the emergency room physicians at Huntsville Hospital fought an agonizing, losing battle to stabilize Alexis Garth, detectives back at the Athens Police Department sat beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the interrogation unit, pulling up the criminal profile of 20-year-old ky'ruan Yarbrough. What they expected to find was a troubled youth. What they actually uncovered on the glowing computer screens was a paper trail of institutional failure so severe it defied belief. As the digital pages of his record loaded, a sickening realization washed over the investigators. The young mother, currently clinging to life by a thread, hadn't just been failed by the man who claimed to love her. She had been systematically abandoned by the very state mechanism designed to protect her. The timeline of Yarbrough's history read like a blueprint for an impending disaster. To the detectives' disbelief, Yarbrough's violent trajectory hadn't started in adulthood. Back in 2019, when he was just 16 years old, a time when most teenagers are navigating high school, Yarbrough had pulled a trigger, opening fire in an incident that left 2 juveniles wounded. Because of his age, the justice system had processed him under the protective umbrella of a youthful offender, ultimately handing him a 36-month suspended sentence. It was a second chance he immediately threw away. When Yarbrough routinely and blatantly violated the strict terms of his probation, a frustrated judge finally revoked his freedom, ordering him to be packed away to a state penitentiary to serve out the remainder of his 3-year sentence. According to the cold, hard math of that judicial order, Yarbrough was legally mandated to remain behind lock and key until at least May of 2023. The detective stared at the calendar on the desk. It was January 1st, 2023. Yarbrough was supposed to be in a cell for another 5 months. The investigation quickly shifted focus from the shooter to the bureaucracy of the Alabama Department of Corrections. How was a man with a documented history of shooting children allowed to walk up a quiet suburban driveway on New Year's Eve? The answer lay in a highly controversial, quietly executed bureaucratic policy known as mandatory release. On December 2, 2022, less than 30 days before he would confront Alexis in the dark, The prison system, strained by chronic overcrowding and federal mandates, opened the gates and let Yarbrough out early. They called it a supervised release, a procedural technicality designed to clear out beds. But to the community of Athens, it felt like a state-sanctioned betrayal. A violent, unrehabilitated offender had been dropped right back into society, completely invisible to the young mother who was just trying to build a future for her daughters. When the news broke that Alexis had tragically succumbed to her injuries, the heartbreak in Limestone County instantly fused with a tidal wave of public fury. The community wasn't just grieving, they were outraged. The public demanded to know why the system's solution to an overcrowded prison was to endanger innocent lives. Sensing the growing unrest and the profound gravity of the crime, prosecutors knew that standard legal procedures wouldn't suffice. They elevated the charges against Yarbrough to capital murder, a designation carrying the potential for the death penalty, specifically because the brutal act had been carried out in the direct, traumatizing presence of Alexis's 3-year-old daughter.
20-year-old ky'ruan Yarbrough is now charged with capital murder in the presence of a child under 14. Investigators believe this was a domestic violence incident.
But charging him was only the first step. Keeping him isolated from the public was another challenge entirely. In a traditional courtroom setting, defense attorneys would argue for a high but attainable bond, allowing a suspect a chance at temporary freedom while awaiting trial. But the state of Alabama had a brand new weapon in its legal arsenal, one that had gone into effect just 1 month prior, in November of 2022. It was called Aniah's Law. Named in honor of Aniah Blanchard, a 19-year-old college student who was kidnapped and murdered by a repeat violent offender out on bond, the constitutional amendment completely reshaped Alabama's justice system. Before its passage, judges were largely required by law to set bail for almost all offenses, short of standard capital crimes. Aniah's Law changed everything, granting prosecutors the explicit power to request that a judge completely deny bond to individuals accused of certain severe, inherently violent offenses if they posed a clear danger to the community. In a high-stakes, emotionally charged courtroom hearing, the prosecution invoked this new law with full force. They laid out Yarbrough's juvenile shooting conviction, his flagrant probation violations, his early release, and the horrific details of the driveway ambush. They argued that Yarbrough had proven time and time after that he had a total disregard for human life and the rule of law. The defense's arguments for a conditional release fell completely flat against the weight of the evidence and the memory of Alexis's final act of bravery. The judge ruled he would never see a bond.
A capital murder suspect in Athens has been denied bond in the case of a deadly shooting on New Year's Day. A pretrial hearing was held for ky'ruan Yarbrough this morning. Athens police say they were called to a shooting on Oakdale Ridge Lane early Sunday morning. Officers saying they found 26-year-old Alexis Garth in the driveway. She was taken to the hospital but died from her injuries.
But for Alexis's grieving family, keeping him behind bars was only half the battle, because a terrifying question remained. How many other violent offenders were walking free through the exact same loophole? The echoing slam of the courtroom doors marked the beginning of a different kind of sentence for the family Alexis Garth left behind. While ky'ruan Yarbrough was led away to a windowless cell to await trial without the possibility of bond, the cold reality of the aftermath settled over the Garth household like a heavy winter fog. The legal victory was necessary, but it could not fill the devastating silence that now consumed the home. Alexis was gone. Left in the wake of those 5 fatal gunshots were 2 completely innocent lives, an infant daughter who would grow up with no personal memory of her mother's voice, and a 3-year-old girl who would carry the psychological scars of that dark driveway for the rest of her days, forever remembering that her mother was the shield that kept her alive. But out of the ashes of this unthinkable tragedy, a profound transformation began to take place. Alexis's mother, Alexis Garth, refused to let her grief dissolve into quiet despair. She looked at her grandchildren, she looked at the community of Athens, Alabama, and she made a solemn, unshakable promise. Alexis would not become just another faceless name in a filing cabinet of domestic violence statistics. Her life and her final heroic sacrifice would mean something. Shunetta stepped directly into the public eye, channeling her heartbreak into a fierce, unwavering crusade for institutional accountability. She became a mother on a mission, refusing to let the Alabama Department of Corrections hide behind the bureaucratic language of mandatory release policies. In public forums, local news interviews, and community rallies, Shunetta asked the hard questions that the state's prison system desperately wanted to avoid. She demanded to know how a violent offender with a history of shooting minors could be released early into an unsuspecting neighborhood without a single warning to the victims or the community. Her voice became a rallying cry for families across the state who had been blindsided by the systemic failures of early prison releases, turning local grief into a statewide conversation about criminal justice reform. Yet Shunetta's mission was double-edged. While she fought the system for accountability, she fought just as hard on the ground to save lives. She partnered with domestic violence advocates, traveling to speak to young women, students, and community groups about the insidious, creeping warning signs of coercive control. She spoke openly about how difficult it is to leave, stripping away the judgment that victims often face and replacing it with raw education and support. Her message was clear. The moment a victim decides to walk away is the most dangerous moment of their life, and society must build stronger safety nets to catch them before the worst happens. But beyond the advocacy, the final tribute to Alexis Garth is found in the way she is remembered. She isn't remembered by the tragedy of her final hour. She is remembered by the brilliant light of her 26 years.
She was a light, very family-oriented, a great friend. You could talk to her about anything. She could light up a room by just walking in it, beautiful smile. Just an all-around good person. Definitely somebody who didn't deserve to die like this. Yeah.
Her family keeps her memory alive by telling her daughters who their mother was, an ambitious student, a vibrant friend, and a woman whose love was so fierce that it defeated fear in a dark driveway on New Year's Day. The community of Athens rallied around the surviving girls, ensuring that the heavy burden of their future would be carried by an entire village, wrapped in the legacy of a mother who gave everything to ensure they could have a tomorrow. Alexis Garth's story is a heartbreaking reminder that our laws are only as strong as the systems that enforce them, and that awareness is often the only shield we have left. We bring these cases to light on this channel because names matter, stories matter, and systemic failures cannot be corrected in the dark. It is through digging deep into these truths that we, as a community, can demand better and potentially prevent the next tragedy before it strikes. If you believe in honoring the memories of victims like Alexis, and if you want to support independent, deeply researched true crime storytelling that seeks accountability rather than exploitation, please take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. The courtroom has spoken, but the conversation does not end here. I want to hear from you. Head down to the comments section right now and tell me your thoughts. How do we fix a prison system that lets violent offenders out early, and what more can be done to protect women when they make the brave choice to leave? Thank you for watching. Keep your loved ones close, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.